Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian McRae, and I'm the Director of Education with Lakehead Public Schools. Over the last number of weeks, we have been working diligently with our coterminous board on the parameters that the Ministry of Education has provided us to develop scenarios for a return to school. We were very pleased when the Minister announced that we would be able to open in a conventional manner as part of the modeling that we have been working on over that period of time. We met with the ministry last week and outlined our plan and received tacit approval to go forward. We presented that plan to the public on Friday evening, and over that period of time have received a number of queries that we hope we can address this afternoon through the presentation by our two academic superintendents, Michelle Probosanski and A.J. Keene. Before they begin their presentations, I want to thank all of you for your patience, perseverance, and tolerance for the ambiguity that this situation has presented. When the Minister of Education first described it as reinventing education and reimagining what we would be doing, I don't think anyone expected that this would be our new reality. We are supporting the conventional return. However, we want to make it very clear that it is not a normal return. So we are pleased to have this opportunity to answer the queries that you have put forward. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lakehead Public Schools Town Hall, an event intended to answer some of the many questions that families have regarding a return to school in a few weeks. We apologize in advance for having to sit and listen for an hour without any visuals, but we know that the information provided will be helpful to you.
Over the next hour, we'll provide answers to questions that have been posed ahead of time, as well as questions that might have come in during our attempt at a live Facebook event this evening. We apologize for the technical difficulties we experienced. However, we have recorded the questions that have come in, and hopefully we can answer. While there's no way we'll be able to answer all of the questions this evening, we will get to as many as we can and hopefully provide some clarity on the burning issues. A reminder that next week, principals will be in school and may be available to answer more specific questions. They will be extremely busy and may not be able to get back to you immediately, but we'll be checking messages and will respond when they can.
Ultimately, the purpose of tonight is to provide you with the information you need to decide if you will send your children to school on September 3rd or will keep them home and opt for remote learning. This decision needs to be made by midnight this coming Friday, August 14th, so that we can begin staffing our schools as well as our online classes.
We are surrounded by uncertainty and bombarded in the media with thousands of studies and stories and plans and conflicting information. It's completely understandable that families are worried and a little bit scared. It's an uncertain and scary time. Lakehead Public Schools receives direction from the Ministry of Education and has worked closely with the Thunder Bay District Health Unit on this reopening plan.
I'd like to talk a minute about the survey. Our survey initially was not about parents choosing a model that they prefer, but rather about choosing to send your child to school for each of the models proposed by the Ministry for reopening. Lakehead Public Schools did not choose the model for return. The Ontario government, specifically the Ministry of Education, has deemed how schools will reopen. We are opening in a conventional return. We are governed by a guidance memo, and the details of that memo are reflected in our reopening plan, which you can review on our website.
There are many aspects of the reopening plan that come directly from the Ministry of Education. Where Lakehead Public Schools has been granted the power to make local decisions about returning to school, we have been guided first and foremost by the health and safety of our students and staff.
There were well over 300 questions posed ahead of time. We've summarized 25 to 30 of them that were pretty common. As well, we're going to respond to some of the questions, as Michelle indicated, that have been posted at our Facebook event tonight. One of the most common questions has to do with tracking and tracing of students. What happens if a student or staff member tests positive for COVID, etc. So, all tracing, tracking, and outbreak management falls under the purvey of the Thunder Bay District Health Unit. The Health Unit is currently waiting for a provincial guidance memo around outbreak management. They do not have that information yet, but this is the information they provided us to date. If a student or staff member has a suspected case, they will be required to contact the local assessment center for testing. While awaiting the test results, close contacts, which means the cohort or student classmates or any classes that the teacher has been part of, would monitor closely for symptoms. If an individual tests negative, they can return to school 24 hours after they are symptom-free. If they test positive, the Thunder Bay District Health Unit will follow up with the case and will conduct a risk assessment of their contacts. This is typically all of the people that the child or staff member have come into contact with. When someone tests positive for COVID-19, they will be followed or managed by a public health nurse, and they use a non-test-based approach for guiding their decision when to discharge someone from self-isolation. A non-test-based approach is recommended by the Ontario Ministry of Health Testing and Clearance Guidance document, and an individual does not need to have a negative test result to be cleared by public health. A case can discontinue isolation 14 days after symptom onset or 15 days from positive test, as long as the individual is not feverish and symptoms have been improving for 72 hours. Confirmed cases of COVID-19 are generally not to be retested within 90 days of clearance, as positive test results are not uncommon due to persistent shedding of the virus. To assist the health unit in their investigation, Lakehead Public Schools will be closely tracking attendance in classes, as well as movement about the school on buses and in childcare programs.
Another question that came about was, how do we mitigate exposure with itinerant teachers and occasional staff? The ministry has indicated that elementary students as well as secondary students will receive a full breadth of curriculum, including specialized teachers like core French and native language teachers. This means schedules will run as they normally do. We do not have enough qualified occasional staff to bubble or cohort supply teachers, SSPs, or ECEs. Bubbling or cohorting supply staff members means that we would be able to assign certain staff members to certain schools, and those would be the only schools that those staff members work at. Again, we do not have enough occasional staff members to be able to do this. We will rely on the professionalism of our staff. All staff will be masked, and any teachers or occasional staff will wash their hands upon entering and leaving a classroom. Distancing measures will be in place, and all staff movement, including supervision areas, will be tracked.
We are jumping around quite a bit in terms of the flow of these questions based on the popularity and the order they came in. So we're moving from casual staff to kindergarten. What will kindergarten look like compared to other classrooms? The kindergarten program is primarily play-based and inquiry-driven, and running an effective program with current restrictions will be very challenging. We have a team working right now consisting of principals, ECEs, and teachers that are creating guidelines for schools around the kindergarten program. They'll be working on it this week, and it'll be in the hands of principals on Monday morning. Here are a few things we know about the kindergarten program. We will restrict the type of toys and furnishings in kindergarten rooms to ensure we have only easy-to-clean rooms. We will not be able to ensure 1 meter distance at all times in kindergarten rooms. 4- and 5-year-olds will not be able to sit in isolation all day, and that's not how kids learn at that age anyway. Our staff will be wearing PPE that's appropriate for the distances they will encounter in kindergarten. We will encourage our educators to conduct outdoor lessons frequently in kindergarten. We're also considering strategies like cohorting part of the class, so that, for example, if there's 18 students in the class, 6 might be assigned a particular station or 2 that they would be at all day. I don't mean they'll be there all day, but they would be the only cohort that would be using it, and the next day they would rotate through that so the kids would get different stations all week. We will endeavor to run the program as normally as possible because we know that development at that age is incredibly important. We also will begin our JK gentle entry as we normally do. Schools will contact parents of JK students to let them know what day their child is to attend at their first day of school. Normally we have an open house on the PA day. We will not be having that. And this is going to be difficult to hear for first-time parents, but parents will not be able to bring their students into the school and drop them off in the class and observe them for the first little while, as might happen in a normal year. Schools will make arrangements for kindergarten students to be dropped off outside where they'll meet the educator team. One of the questions that came out of tonight that I'm going to talk about right now is kindergarten students are not required to come every day to school. We have many JK students who don't come 5 days a week, so some parents have asked if they would be able to send their child in kindergarten 2 or 3 days a week. That is perfectly acceptable. Just know that there wouldn't be any programming provided for your child on those off days. If you choose to send them to school but not choose them to send every day, they will be considered part of our in-school cohort.
Questions were surrounding remote learning, and if students were to opt into the remote learning, what would it look like at elementary and secondary? Online learning in the spring was rapidly put in place and was somewhat considered emergency learning. This fall, online learning, or remote learning, will look and function very differently. The online tools such as EDSB, MS Teams, and Seesaw that will be used to connect teachers and students from home will be the same tools used in the classroom to provide for consistency. Every day there will be synchronous learning times, the length of which will be determined by grade level.
The elementary daily schedule will look like this. Attendance will be taken daily. There will be 300 minutes of instruction provided. That will be a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous learning. Synchronous just means live teaching. In other words, there'll be somebody at the other end of the computer who's teaching live, providing live lessons, or providing live feedback to students. Asynchronous would be where the teacher would either previously record something, assign a book or website to read, and follow up questions, etc. So you can imagine that your student's day would be a combination of both of those learning styles.
For secondary daily schedule, students will be timetabled in 2 classes per quadmester. We will discuss what a quadmester is further in the presentation this evening. Students will take 1 course in the morning at secondary and 1 in the afternoon. There will be a total of 300 minutes of instruction per day split between the 2 courses, which will be delivered in a combination of synchronous and asynchronous methods. Any synchronous learning will take place during the designated timetabled course, either in the morning or the afternoon. Digital platforms will be EDSB, Brightspace, and Microsoft Teams. Students will have 2 teachers per quadmester and will remain attached to their home secondary school. They will remain in their course selections as much as possible depending on the availability of specialized teachers. The focus will be on overall expectations, and assessment and evaluation of skills and knowledge throughout the course will include a variety of assessments, including final assessment tasks that might include exams. As was the case during the emergency closure period, students engaging in remote learning will be supported by Lakehead Public Schools with respect to devices and connectivity.
Point for clarification in terms of one of the questions that came up quite frequently is, can I send my child every other day instead? And they're talking about the adapted model. We were asked to prepare 3 models of delivery: conventional, full return every day, adaptive, and fully remote. We could move at any given time to one of the other models if the ministry decides it, but it will not be a local board decision. The Ministry of Education, in consultation with Public Health, will determine if we need to move from a conventional return into an adapted model. An adapted model would be very similar to what we see in the conventional model with respect to health and safety and cleaning, but you would see smaller cohorts and every other day delivery of in-class learning, and when they're at home there would be an online component. Remote learning, as Michelle already described, would be very different than the emergency learning we saw in the spring. It would be a much more fulsome program. We will not move to those models unless we are directed to by the Ministry of Education.
Questions around special education. Students will continue to receive support from special education staff, including teachers and SSPs, based on individual need, whether at home or at school. Summer transition programs supporting students with special education needs will be running from August 17th to the 28th, and staff in the special education department will be reaching out to students who are involved in those transition programs. IEPs, or individual education plans, including transition plans, will be updated to determine the most appropriate plan for individual students. IPRCs will be held appropriately during the school year with the option of holding virtual meetings. Special education equipment will be available to students whether in school or at home, and a schedule and cleaning regime will be established for all special education rooms, including ready rooms. Use of shared items or equipment will be discouraged. Equipment that must be shared will be cleaned and disinfected before and after each use, or users will perform hand hygiene before and after each use. Consideration of additional PPE for staff and students based on individual needs and consideration of public health will be provided.
One of the biggest questions parents have has to do with changing their minds, and that makes a lot of sense. Parents will choose to send their child to school or keep them home for a lot of personal reasons. And as the school year progresses, seeing what happens, you may change your mind going either way. I want to explain why we have entry points to go from remote learning to in-school learning. What we're doing in the next couple weeks is taking all the information from all the parents who have registered their children for school on our survey and determining exactly how many kids we will have in class and exactly how many kids we will have in remote learning. As you can imagine, That's a pretty daunting task. So, for example, let's take a school of 200 students. Right now, we're looking at about 80% of parents are deciding to send their kids to school. So that leaves about 40 students who would not be coming to school. In a school of 200, that could represent 2 classes, but those students are probably from JK to 8, and they would not be able to fit into a single class or 2 classes in that school online. What that means is they'll be part of a cohort that will include students from other schools in order to keep them at their grade level. We do not have enough teachers at this time who will be off, or not able to teach rather, in school because of medical reasons. There are a number of teachers who will be teaching remotely because of that, but there aren't enough to teach all of the projected remote classes, so we are going to have to assign teachers to remote classes. Because of that, we can't just have people change their minds whenever they'd like. So we have 3 re-entry points to come in school. We'd like to give you the opportunity to do that relatively quickly. In high school, it lines up with the Quadmesters. In elementary, it's October 13th, February 1st, and March 22nd. However, secondary is November 11th, February 1st, and April 20th. However, going the other way is very understandable. If you have your child at school and you don't think things are going well and you don't feel safe, you will be able to opt into the remote learning at any time. However, we would ask that you understand it's going to take a little bit of time to find them a class, assign them to a teacher. We won't be able to do it the very next day, but we will endeavor to do it as quickly as possible.
There was a number of questions regarding secondary spares and where those would occur. In our present plan, which may change and could change, spares will be in a designated space in the school, such as a cafeteria or a library or another designated classroom. Of course, as always, during spares, students may leave the building.
Lots of questions about sports and clubs. Understandable, co-curricular activities are very important. Our goal for September is to take this re-entry slow. Focus on health and safety and teaching and learning. Co-curriculars like sports, clubs, field trips, etc. will all be on hold to start the school year. Our athletic director has been meeting with other directors across the province and consulting with various sports organizations, OFIA, OFSA, etc. We've identified low, medium, and high risk sports. We do have a plan to schedule those sports when we know it is safe to do so. So for the time being, we're really focusing on the health and safety of kids and teaching and learning, and co-curriculars are on hold for now.
Music classes. Classes with wind and or brass instruments, as well as vocal classes, both at the elementary and secondary level, will not be taught in the first term or semester, which would include both Quad 1 and Quad 2. We will revisit these classes as we move forward in the school year and come closer to the next semester or term.
Food offerings. Cafeterias will not be offering food. There'll be no vending machines. Microwave ovens will not be available for students. Food support programs like breakfast clubs and snack programs will run. We'll provide schools with guidelines on how to manage those safely. They'll focus on grab-and-go foods, and there'll be no mingling of cohorts in the distribution of foods. For September, there'll be no hot lunch programs running, though we will be investigating how to safely start those programs again. Same thing with milk sales. Foods classes will continue to run normally at secondary school. Masking for kids and staff. Staff PPE will be provided by the school board. All staff are required to wear a medical mask. All staff provided with a face shield that they can use, and there'll be specialized PPE for unique situations like toileting. For students, all JK to 3 students will be encouraged to wear a mask, but it is not mandatory. All students in grade 4 to 12 are required to wear a mask at school. We did have a question about whether a face shield could be used instead of a mask. Our guidance from the ministry is a mask at this point. That doesn't preclude a student from wearing a face shield and a mask, but they are required to wear a mask. There are exemptions, of course, that can be made. Parents will discuss those with the school principal. If they have an appropriate reason for a child not able to wear a mask, then exemptions can be made. We will provide training and recommendations around mask cleaning for students and family. How often do you wash the cloth mask, etc. And in grade 3-4 split classes, we will require the grade 3s to wear the masks as well for consistency in the class.
We do address cleaning and sanitizing in our school reopening plan, but there were some questions. Just to reiterate, there will be hand sanitizer at the entry to all classrooms, as well as the entry into the school at all doors. We will have frequent hand hygiene breaks at both elementary and secondary, twice daily high contact surface cleaning. There will be daily cleaning of all of the whole school, and approved products only that have been approved by the Ministry of Education and Public Health. Between cohort use of materials, there will be cleaning. There's been talk about cohorting, and the question has arisen, what does that exactly mean? So a cohort is a group of students who spend a regular amount of time together. In elementary, student-to-student contacts are limited to 50 during the instructional day, which means there will likely be 2 cohorts for every student, their class, and then the students who are with them on the playground, or perhaps an after-school or before-school program. In secondary, student-to-student contacts are limited to 100 over a 1 to 2 week period, which means that they attend 2 classes, and then there may be some other clubs or groups eventually that we reintegrate into the school life that they can be a part of.
Lots of questions around lunchtime, snack, and outside time. I'll talk about elementary first. So recess and snack time will be staggered and or flipped. What that means is that we will limit the number of students outside in any particular area at any one time. So you might see situations where some students eat first and then go outside, others go outside first and then eat. You might also see 2 recesses back to back that look like that in some of our larger schools. Students will eat in their classrooms with their cohort. Obviously, during that time, they will not be required to wear their masks while they are eating. They will also not be required to wear their masks while they are outside. Outside time and space will be limited, so cohort mingling is reduced. We will make sure there's no bottleneck at entry and exits of students coming in and out. Students will be informed of appropriate games and play that will respect distancing. And where possible and weather permitting, it will be encouraged that students actually eat lunch outside, and it'll be nice to get them spread out and enjoy the weather. We hope that that continues into the fall.
Further to that, for the secondary students, lunch will be eaten in their classrooms with the cohort from their first block or their first course that they take in the morning. Students at secondary may also leave at lunch if they so choose, and of course they will be encouraged to eat outside whenever possible.
Transportation, bus routes. I would, before I answer this, I would also recommend that parents can contact STSTB. I know they've been putting up their first rider program, how they're managing that, so there's lots of information coming from that website already. Bus routes will continue as per STSTB policy. Buses will be cleaned daily. Seating plans will be made and siblings will be permitted to sit together. Distance will be maintained as much as possible and children in grades 4 to 12 will be masked. However, originally the ministry talked about 1 child per seat. That's only an adopted model. We will see more than 1 child in a seat with our current bus routes in a conventional return. Parents who would rather drop and pick up their children will hear from their school regarding the protocol to do so. But we know that it'll be an option for a lot of parents, and we'll ensure that we have proper distancing and safety protocols in place for that.
There were many questions surrounding mental health supports. We will continue to work with School Mental Health Ontario to provide us with the tools we need to support the mental health of all students. The board will continue to implement a tiered approach for mental health, which includes support from the mental health lead and a total of 6 social workers, 3 in elementary and 3 in secondary. Referral processes will remain the same for student mental health concerns. Tips and links to well-being support in the community will continue to be posted on the board and the school websites. There's a summer transition program upcoming, August 17th to the 28th, that will support students with mental health needs who are transitioning back to school.
The school calendar may seem a little bit odd this year. Obviously, as our director indicated, nothing is normal. School boards were requested by the ministry to start school prior to or by September 1st, and also to have 3 PA days at the beginning of the school year. As such, we have PA days August 31st, September 1st and 2nd, and children are returning September 3rd. During those first 3 PA days, educators will receive training on keeping themselves safe, recognizing symptoms, proper hygiene and cleaning protocols, tracking and tracing, obviously curriculum and communication. But one of the things they'll also be doing is training students to adhere to health and safety protocols.
There were many questions about what a Quadmester is, how it works, and what secondary schools will look like on that schedule. So normally, the secondary schedule allows for 4 courses per semester, and there's 2 semesters throughout the school year. All students receive 300 minutes of instruction per day, and that will not change. According to the guidelines given to us by the ministry, we must create a timetable that limits student-to-student contacts, as previously mentioned, to 100 over a 1 to 2 week time period. We are also encouraged to keep secondary school students in a maximum of 2 in-person class cohorts. A Quadmester helps to achieve these goals. We're able to offer the same school and student timetables as planned, but split the course delivery between 2 quads in semester 1 from September 3rd to November 5th, and then November 11th to January 25th, and 2 quads in semester 2, February 1st to April 14th, and April 20th to June 22nd. So as you see, normally we have 1 semester, we've split it into 2, they're called Quadmesters. So 2 Quadmesters for what would have been first semester, 2 Quadmesters for what would have been second semester. In those quads, students will take 2 courses per day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Students will change courses after 44 days, 2 in the first quad, 2 new ones in the next quad. There were some questions wondering whether students would be in the same 2 courses throughout the year. They will still have the same student timetable as they would have normally. Again, it will just be split into 4 quads throughout the year, 2, 4, 6, 8 courses. We are in the process of finalizing the schedules and exact times for the classes. However, the start and end times of the school day will not change. It'll be 9:30 to 3:30 each day. This schedule will include breaks during the instructional time, and exams will occur after each quadmester. Student course selections at the secondary level were made last February, and timetables will be finalized in the next 2 weeks. Timetables will be sent home before school begins. There were questions regarding special supports in schools like speech or occupational therapy for students who choose to learn remotely. So many supports like speech and OT will continue to be offered in our schools and for those students who are at home. But at this time, we're offering these services virtually. We would like to limit the number of people who are in our schools daily. So this may change as we work our way throughout the school year.
Building on what Michelle said, this is a difficult one, but we will be restricting visitors to our schools by appointment only. There will be protocols in place for all visitors that include masking, hand washing upon entry, and use of specific entries. Parents will not be able to enter the school and drop off students, but instead will be met outside by staff. Schools will develop a protocol for parents to drop off forgotten items, like lunch and books, without actually coming into the school.
Some live questions from this evening's event. One was whether the IB program was continuing as planned. Yes, the IB program will continue. There may be some changes to the scheduling as per the discussion around quadmestering, but the principal is working toward ensuring that the program continues almost as closely as planned as possible.
Our plan clearly outlines the role of the parent, particularly in terms of screening. There will be no temperature taking at schools for children to enter the school. Parents are required to screen at home and before they put their child on a bus or before they drop them off, they need to screen them for symptoms every day. We know that there are many reasons for symptoms. We will be very strict requiring students and staff not to be at school if they are sick or symptomatic, even though some of these symptoms may be a cold instead of COVID. We're not taking chances, and if a child is sent home because they're symptomatic, then they will be required to contact the assessment center or public health. The screening tool will be posted very clearly. It will be communicated clearly by schools. It does ask for new symptoms. So a student or staff member who is habitually symptomatic, so for example, allergies with a consistently running nose, if that's not a new symptom, then they would be okay to be at school.
There's a question regarding the explanation of what we mean when we refer to tracking sheets. And would parents be notified where their children are going during the day during school hours? When we refer to tracking sheets, we're talking about tracking students during the day. For example, if a class goes to the library and uses the library, we would have the students' names or the class or cohort recorded as having gone in the library at a certain time on a certain date. Secondary, for example, if we have somebody on a spare and using the library, they would sign in and sign out so that we would be able to contact trace if need be. We have daily attendance of obviously of our staff and students, and that will be a part of the tracking that we need to do. Parents won't be notified as to where their student is throughout the school day, but I'm sure your students will be, or your children will be very excited to come home and tell you all of the amazing things they did during their school day.
Will French Immersion be available for online or remote learning? Absolutely. We expect that we will have a considerable number of French Immersion students who will be in the Cohort C or remote learning program, and we will have teachers, French Immersion teachers assigned to those classes. Question about the availability for those that live rurally and internet cannot support remote learning via video. I am one of those people. I live somewhere where the internet is terrible, so I fully understand and sympathize. We will endeavor to provide families who don't have strong internet but maybe have strong cell service with a cell phone with a data plan to use as a hotspot so they can connect. If all of the avenues are exhausted, then there will have to be a paper program, obviously, for those that are engaging in remote learning, but we will take a look at all technology options before we go to that.
Are co-op programs running? How and when would these work? Co-op programs, as it stands right now, will be running. There's more information to come. The ministry has suggested that we look at virtual co-op placements. The co-op teachers, I'm sure, have already been looking at that along with their principals as to where they could have placements within the community, but I'm sure there's also face-to-face placements that could take place with the health and safety requirements needed. So we are still working on co-op, and more information will be coming. When students participate in the distance education option or the remote learning, how will testing and grading be performed? So as mentioned above, there will be a variety of assessment and evaluation strategies used just as within the classroom. And so teachers are expected to perform as they would any other online course, both at secondary and at elementary, and perform the assessment and evaluation that is expected as per usual, whether it's face-to-face or online. And so students will be graded as they would be if they were in the classroom.
Will families be notified if there's a positive test at their children's school? I am told by the district health unit that if a positive test occurs in a student or staff member, then all of the contacts that person has been in close proximity to will have to be assessed. That does not necessarily mean they'll all have to have a test, but they certainly will have to be monitored for symptoms, which means they will be informed. The communication process is one that will be developed by the district health unit, and we'll communicate that when we get it from them. At this point, I think we're going to stop, and thank you for your patience tonight, and thank you for tuning in. We recognize that there still will be many questions you might have. I would suggest that you go to the Facebook Live survey or form that we had to post questions. We'll continue to monitor that. And communication is extremely important, like in public schools, so we'll endeavor to answer questions in the best way that we can.
Thank you very much.